I never thought my neighbor's roofing problems would become my legal nightmare, but that was before I met Patricia from the HOA board. My name is Marcus Patterson, and I bought my dream home in Scottsdale, Arizona, 6 months ago. The place was perfect. A beautiful two-story Spanish colonial with terracotta tiles, a spacious backyard and mountain views that took my breath away every morning. The neighborhood of Desert Springs Estates seemed peaceful enough when I moved in, despite having an active homeowners association. I figured I could handle the usual HOA stuff, like keeping my lawn tidy and painting my house approved colors. What I did not anticipate was the absolute chaos that would unfold because of a woman who believed property lines were suggestions rather than legal boundaries. It started on a Tuesday morning in late January. I was working from home, finishing up some architectural drawings for a client when my doorbell rang. I glanced at my watch and saw it was barely 8 in the morning. When I opened the door, a woman in her mid-50s stood there wearing tennis whites and a visor, clutching a leather-bound folder against her chest like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Marcus Patterson?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "That's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Patricia Pemberton, head of the Desert Springs Estates HOA board. We need to discuss your tree." I blinked at her. "My tree? The cottonwood on your property line. Its branches are extending over my roof, and I need you to trim them immediately. There are leaves and debris accumulating on my tiles." I stepped outside and looked toward her property. Patricia lived in the house directly adjacent to mine, separated by a low stucco wall that marked our property line. Sure enough, my cottonwood tree, a massive specimen that had to be at least 40 years old, had branches that stretched over the wall and hung above a portion of her roof. "I can take a look at it," I said, trying to be reasonable. "But those branches have been there since before I moved in." The home inspector never mentioned it being a problem. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Well, it's a problem now. I'm having issues with my roof and your tree is the cause. I expect you to handle this within the next week." "Wait, what kind of issues are we talking about?" She opened her folder and pulled out several photos. They showed her roof covered in leaves and small twigs, but nothing that looked particularly alarming. Just normal debris that accumulates when you have a tree nearby. "See, your tree is destroying my property value." The HOA bylaws state that homeowners must maintain their trees and prevent them from becoming a nuisance to neighboring properties. I took the photos and examined them more carefully. "Patricia, I understand your concern, but this looks like normal leaf accumulation. Have you been cleaning your gutters regularly?" Her face flushed red. "I should not have to clean my gutters because of your tree. This is your responsibility." "Actually, I think we need to clarify what my responsibility is here. If branches extend over your property, I believe Arizona law allows you to trim them back to the property line. But maintaining your roof and gutters is your responsibility." Patricia's expression turned icy. "I am the HOA board president, Mr. Patterson. I know the rules better than you do. Your tree, your problem. Fix it, or I'll be forced to take action." She turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, leaving me standing in my doorway holding photos of her leaf-covered roof. I went back inside and called my real estate agent, Linda, who had helped me buy the house. She listened to my story and sighed. "Marcus, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Patricia Pemberton has a reputation in that neighborhood. She's very particular about everything and uses her HOA position to bully people into doing what she wants." "Great. So what are my actual obligations here?" "Honestly, I'd recommend consulting with a property attorney. Arizona has specific laws about trees and property lines, and you want to make sure you're not liable for something that isn't actually your responsibility. I thanked Linda and started researching attorneys in Scottsdale. By that afternoon, I had an appointment scheduled with Robert Chen, a property lawyer who came highly recommended. Our meeting was set for Thursday, which gave me 2 days to document everything and prepare. Wednesday morning, I was out in my yard taking photos of the tree and measurements of where the branches extended when Patricia appeared at the property wall. "I see you're finally addressing the problem," she said. "I'm documenting the current state of the tree," I replied. "I have a meeting with my attorney tomorrow to discuss the legal situation." Her face turned purple. "Legal situation? There's no legal situation here. You have a tree, it's damaging my property, and you need to fix it. This is not complicated." "Patricia, I want to do the right thing, but I also want to understand what my actual legal obligations are. That seems reasonable." "What's reasonable is being a good neighbor and taking responsibility for your property. I've lived in this neighborhood for 12 years, Mr. Patterson. I know how things work here. And I've owned my home for 6 months, which means this tree has been extending over your property for at least that long, probably much longer. Why is it suddenly a crisis now?" She clutched her folder tighter. "Because I'm having roof problems and your tree is making them worse. I've been patient, but my patience has limits." "What kind of roof problems, specifically?" Patricia hesitated, and I caught something in her expression that made me suspicious. "That's none of your business. Just trim your tree." She left before I could respond, and I made a note to ask my attorney about this. Something about her evasiveness suggested there was more to this story than she was telling me. Thursday's meeting with Robert Chen was enlightening. I showed him all the photos, explained the situation, and waited for his assessment. "Okay, so Arizona law is actually pretty clear on this," Robert said, leaning back in his chair. "If a tree is on your property and branches extend over the property line, your neighbor has the right to trim those branches back to the property line at their own expense. They can't force you to do it unless the tree itself is dead, diseased, or poses an imminent hazard. So I don't have to trim it just because she demands it, correct? However, if the tree is actually causing damage to her property, that could create liability for you. But from what you're describing, we're talking about leaves and normal debris, not structural damage." She mentioned roof problems but wouldn't elaborate. Robert raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting. Has she provided any documentation of actual damage, reports from contractors, estimates for repairs, anything like that? Just photos of leaves on her roof? Then you're probably fine. My recommendation is to send her a formal letter stating that she's welcome to trim any branches extending over her property line, but that you're not obligated to do so. If she claims there's actual damage, request documentation and an independent assessment." "What about the HOA?" She threatened to take action. "The HOA can only enforce their own bylaws, and those bylaws can't contradict state law. Do you have a copy of your HOA documents?" I pulled them out of my bag. Robert spent the next 20 minutes reading through the relevant sections. "This is what I thought," he said finally. "The bylaws require homeowners to maintain their trees in good condition and not allow them to become hazards. But there's nothing here that says you have to prevent normal leaf fall onto neighboring properties. That would be impossible to enforce. Trees drop leaves, it's what they do." I felt relief wash over me. "So what's my next step?" "Let me draft a letter to Patricia and the HOA board. We'll lay out the legal situation clearly and politely. Offer to coordinate if she wants to hire someone to trim the overhanging branches, but make it clear that you're not accepting responsibility for normal tree behavior or for maintaining her roof. We wrapped up the meeting, and Robert said he'd have the letter ready by Friday. I drove home feeling better about the situation, though I had a nagging feeling that Patricia was not going to take this well. I was right. Monday morning, I found a certified letter from the HOA in my mailbox. It was an official notice of violation, stating that I was in breach of the community bylaws for failure to maintain landscaping in a manner that does not negatively impact neighboring properties. The letter gave me 15 days to remedy the violation or face fines of $100 per day. I immediately called Robert Chen. "They're trying to bully you," he said after I read him the letter. "This is a common tactic. Send me a copy of that notice and I'll draft a response. In the meantime, do not take any action on the tree. We're going to fight this. Can they really fine me $100 a day? They can try. But if we can prove the violation notice is baseless, you won't have to pay. Arizona law requires HOAs to act reasonably and in good faith. Fining you for normal tree behavior doesn't meet that standard." Over the next week, the situation escalated. Robert sent his response to the HOA, clearly laying out why their violation notice was improper. The HOA board, led by Patricia, responded with an even more aggressive letter, claiming that I was being a hostile and uncooperative homeowner, and threatening to place a lien on my property if I did not comply. That's when I decided to go on the offensive. I requested a formal hearing before the HOA board, which was my right under the bylaws. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the community clubhouse. Robert advised me to prepare thoroughly and to bring my own evidence. "These hearings can be hostile," he warned. "Patricia will try to control the narrative, but you have facts and law on your side. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and don't let them provoke you into saying something you'll regret." I spent the weekend preparing. I printed out copies of Arizona's property line laws, Robert's legal opinion, photos of the tree and Patricia's roof, and a timeline of all our interactions. I even drove around the neighborhood and took photos of dozens of other properties where trees extended over property lines, just to demonstrate that this was normal in the community. Tuesday evening arrived, and I walked into the clubhouse with my banker's box full of evidence and Robert by my side. The board consisted of 5 members: Patricia as president, a retired accountant named Gerald Morrison as treasurer, a yoga instructor named Susan Klein as secretary, and 2 at-large members named Tom Wright and Jennifer Harrison. Patricia sat at the center of a long table, looking every bit like a judge preparing to render a verdict. The other board members flanked her, though they looked considerably less comfortable with the situation. "This hearing is called to order," Patricia announced. "We're here to address the ongoing violation by Mr. Marcus Patterson regarding the cottonwood tree on his property that is damaging my home." Robert cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Mrs. Pemberton, but this is a hearing about alleged HOA violations, not damage to your personal property." "Those are separate legal issues." Patricia glared at him. "The violation is the tree, the damage is why we're enforcing the bylaws." "Then let's talk about the violation," Robert said smoothly. "Mr. Patterson has provided extensive documentation showing that his tree is healthy, maintained, and not in violation of any HOA bylaw or Arizona state law. What's actually happening here is that Mrs. Pemberton wants Mr. Patterson to prevent normal leaf fall, which is neither reasonable nor legally required." Susan, the secretary, raised her hand timidly. "I'm sorry, but can someone explain exactly what Mr. Patterson is supposed to have violated? I've read through the bylaws, and I'm not seeing where it says he has to keep leaves from falling on neighboring properties." Patricia shot Susan a look that could have melted steel. The violation is creating a nuisance for neighboring homeowners. But is leaf fall from a healthy tree actually a nuisance under the bylaws? Susan pressed. I spoke up. I have photos here of at least 20 other properties in this neighborhood where trees extend over property lines, including several board members' homes. Is the HOA planning to cite all of those homeowners as well? I passed around the photos. Tom Wright, one of the at-large members, examined them and frowned. Patricia, this is my house, he said, pointing to one photo. My oak tree extends over the Johnsons' property. Are you going to fine me too? That's different, Patricia snapped. How is it different? Because the Johnsons aren't complaining about damage. Robert leaned forward. Mrs. Pemberton, you keep mentioning damage. Can you provide any documentation of actual structural damage caused by Mr. Patterson's tree? Engineering reports, contractor assessments, anything? Patricia's jaw tightened. I have photos of leaves. We've seen them. Leaves are not structural damage. If you're claiming actual damage to your roof, you need to prove it with expert testimony. Gerald, the treasurer, adjusted his glasses. Patricia, I have to agree with Mr. Chen here. We can't fine a homeowner based solely on your personal complaints without clear evidence of a bylaw violation. This could expose the HOA to a lawsuit. We have the authority to enforce community standards, Patricia insisted. Within reason, Gerald replied. And this doesn't seem reasonable. The hearing continued for another hour, with Patricia becoming increasingly agitated as it became clear the other board members were not supporting her position. Finally, Susan made a motion to dismiss the violation notice, and Tom seconded it. The vote was 4-1, with only Patricia voting to uphold the fine. I felt a wave of relief, but I could see in Patricia's expression that this was far from over. As Robert and I packed up our materials, Patricia approached us. This isn't finished, she said quietly. My roof has serious problems and your tree is the cause. If you won't fix it voluntarily, I'll make sure you're held responsible. Mrs. Pemberton, Robert said, if you believe the tree is causing actual damage, you're welcome to hire a structural engineer to assess the situation. But making threats isn't going to help your case. It's not a threat. It's a promise. She walked away, leaving me with an uneasy feeling in my stomach. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of chainsaws. I rushed outside to find a tree service truck parked on the street and 2 workers in my cottonwood tree cutting branches. Hey, stop, I yelled. Who authorized this? One of the workers climbed down. We got a work order from Patricia Pemberton. She said she owns both properties and needs the tree trimmed. She lied to you. I own this property and I did not authorize any tree work. You need to stop immediately. The worker's face went pale. Oh man, seriously. She showed us paperwork and everything. She committed fraud. Stop working right now and I need copies of whatever documents she gave you. The workers stopped and the crew chief called his office. Within minutes, they had confirmed that the work order was suspicious and they packed up and left. But the damage was done. Several large branches had already been cut, leaving my beautiful cottonwood asymmetrical and wounded. I immediately called Robert Chen and the Scottsdale Police Department. 2 officers arrived within the hour. I showed them the cut branches, explained the situation, and provided them with copies of all the documentation from the HOA dispute. They took my statement and went next door to speak with Patricia. I could hear raised voices through the walls, and then Patricia appeared in her doorway, the officers standing on her porch. This is harassment, she yelled across the yards. I have every right to protect my property. One of the officers responded, though I could not hear what he said. Patricia's response was loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. I am the HOA president. I know what I'm doing." The officers spoke with her for another 15 minutes before walking back to my house. "Mr. Patterson, we've issued Mrs. Pemberton a citation for criminal trespass," one officer said. She admitted to authorizing the tree work, claiming she thought she had the right to do so because of the HOA violation notice. "We've explained that the violation notice was dismissed and that she has no authority to alter your property." "What happens next?" "She'll have to appear in court for the trespass charge. In the meantime, we've advised her to have no further contact with you except through legal channels. If she violates that, call us immediately." "Can I file a civil suit for the damage to my tree?" "That's between you and your attorney, but yes, you can pursue damages in civil court." After the officers left, I walked around my tree examining the damage. The workers had cut 3 major branches, and the tree would need professional care to recover properly. I took extensive photos and called a certified arborist to assess the damage. The arborist, a woman named Dr. Rachel Kim, came out that afternoon. She spent nearly an hour examining the tree and taking measurements. "The good news is the tree will survive," she said finally. "But whoever cut these branches did a poor job. These are hack cuts that will leave the tree vulnerable to disease and pests. You'll need corrective pruning, and I'd recommend a treatment plan to help the tree heal." "How much are we talking about?" "The corrective work will run about $3,000. I can provide a detailed report for your attorney if you need it for legal action." I thanked her and authorized the work. My beautiful cottonwood, which had been a major selling point for the house, was now scarred and unbalanced. And all because Patricia could not accept that her roof problems were not my responsibility. But I still did not know what those roof problems actually were. That mystery was solved the following week when Patricia's house was suddenly swarmed with contractors. I watched from my window as workers erected scaffolding around her house and began removing sections of her roof. Whatever was going on, it was serious and expensive, judging by the size of the crew. My next-door neighbor on the other side, an elderly man named Frank Delgado, came over that evening with some interesting information. "Marcus, I thought you should know what's going on over there," Frank said, gesturing toward Patricia's house. "I was talking to one of the contractors. Patricia's roof is failing because of poor installation. Apparently, when she had it replaced 5 years ago, the contractor did not properly install the underlayment, and water has been seeping into the structure. She's looking at a complete roof replacement, plus repairs to the underlying structure. Could be $50,000 or more. And she's trying to blame my tree for it." "Exactly. I think she realized how expensive this was going to be and decided to find someone else to pay for it. You were the convenient target. This changed everything." Patricia was not just being a difficult neighbor. She was trying to commit insurance fraud or at least shift financial responsibility for her own contractor's failures onto me. I called Robert Chen immediately. "This is actually good for our case," he said. "If she's trying to blame your tree for damage that was actually caused by faulty installation, that's going to be very easy to disprove. We should hire our own structural engineer to assess the situation." "How do we do that if it's her house?" "We can't access her property without permission, but we can observe from your property and from the street. And if this goes to court, we can subpoena her contractor records and have an engineer review them." Robert arranged for a structural engineer named Dr. Michael Torres to visit my property. Dr. Torres had 40 years of experience and had testified in hundreds of property disputes. He arrived on Saturday morning, armed with cameras, measuring equipment, and a drone. We spent 2 hours documenting everything: the tree, The property line, the angle of the branches, and extensive photos and video of Patricia's roof work from publicly accessible vantage points. "This is interesting," Dr. Torres said, examining his drone footage. "I can see from here that they're replacing not just the tiles but the entire roof deck. That's consistent with water damage, not tree damage. Tree branches don't cause that kind of structural failure. So my tree had nothing to do with this. I'd need to see the contractor's reports to be certain, but from what I'm observing, this looks like a long-term water intrusion problem. Probably from improper flashing or underlayment installation. The leaves on her roof might have clogged her gutters, which could have exacerbated water problems, but they did not cause the structural failure. Could the tree branches have damaged the tiles themselves?" Dr. Torres zoomed in on his screen. "I can see some cracked tiles, but those are old cracks. And honestly, branches that size aren't heavy enough to crack terracotta tiles under normal circumstances. You'd need a major storm or a falling branch, and I don't see any evidence of that." He spent another hour compiling his findings into a preliminary report. The conclusion was clear. My tree was not responsible for Patricia's roof failure. "I'll have a full written report ready in a few days," Dr. Torres said. "But I can tell you right now, if she tries to sue you for this, she's going to lose." I thanked him and felt a sense of vindication, but I also felt anger. Patricia had put me through weeks of stress, cost me thousands in legal and tree care expenses, and had even gone so far as to have my tree illegally cut. All to avoid taking responsibility for her own home maintenance failures. Monday morning, I was not surprised to find another certified letter waiting for me. This time, it was not from the HOA. It was from Patricia's attorney. A demand letter claiming that my negligent maintenance of a hazardous tree had caused extensive damage to her property, and demanding that I pay for her roof repairs. The letter claimed I owed her $57,000. I forwarded it to Robert Chen, along with Dr. Torres's preliminary report. "Perfect," Robert said when I called him. "She's making this too easy. We have documentation that your tree is not hazardous, that it did not cause her roof failure, and that she suffered no damages from normal leaf fall. Plus, we have evidence that she committed criminal trespass by authorizing work on your tree. This is going to be a slam dunk. So what do we do?" I'll respond to her attorney, provide our evidence, and make it clear that we're not paying a dime. I'll also put them on notice that we're considering a countersuit for your damages from the illegal tree cutting, harassment, and abuse of her HOA position. That should get their attention. Robert's response went out that afternoon. 2 days later, I received a call from Patricia's attorney, a man named David Bronstein. "Mr. Patterson, I'd like to discuss a possible settlement," he said. "I'm listening." "After reviewing the information your attorney provided, it appears there may have been some misunderstanding about the source of my client's roof damage. However, she still maintains that your tree contributed to the problem by clogging her gutters and preventing proper drainage. Your client also illegally had my tree cut and filed a fraudulent HOA violation against me," I replied. "I'm the one who should be receiving a settlement offer, not making one." There was a long pause. "Mr. Patterson, I don't think litigation benefits anyone here. What would it take to resolve this amicably? An apology, reimbursement for my tree care costs and legal fees, and a guarantee that she'll leave me alone. I'll speak with my client." I did not hear back from Bronstein for over a week. During that time, the contractor finished Patricia's roof work. The house looked beautiful with its new terracotta tiles, and I could only imagine how much it had cost her. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then, On a Friday afternoon, I came home from running errands to find my cottonwood tree covered in orange paint. Someone had spray painted "Hazard" and "Remove" all over the trunk and remaining branches. I was furious. I called the police immediately, and the same two officers who had responded to the tree-cutting incident arrived within 30 minutes. "Let me guess," one of them said, looking at the graffiti. "Patricia Pemberton." "I don't have proof, but yes, that would be my guess. We'll talk to her." "This is vandalism, and she's already been warned about contact with you." The officers went next door, and this time Patricia must have realized she had gone too far. I could see through her windows that she was crying and gesturing frantically. The conversation lasted a long time. When the officers returned, they looked grim. "Mrs. Pemberton denies any involvement with the graffiti," one of them said, "but we've made it clear that if there are any further incidents, we will arrest her. We've also advised her attorney to contact your attorney immediately to resolve this dispute." "Did she say anything else?" The officer hesitated. "Off the record, I think she's having some kind of breakdown. The roof repair costs apparently wiped out most of her savings, and I think she's fixated on blaming you for all of it. She needs help, but that's not something we can force. I called a professional cleaning service to remove the paint from my tree, which cost another $800. Every expense got added to the running total I was documenting for my potential lawsuit. On Monday morning, David Bronstein called me again. "Mr. Patterson, my client has authorized me to make a settlement offer. She'll pay for the tree damage and your attorney's fees to date, which we calculate at approximately $4,000. In exchange, you'll sign a mutual release agreeing not to pursue any further legal action against each other." "What about an apology?" "She's willing to provide a written apology as part of the settlement. And the spray paint incident," there was a pause. "Mrs. Pemberton maintains she had nothing to do with that. Of course she does. Tell her to add the cost of the paint removal to the settlement, and I want the apology to specifically acknowledge that her roof problems were not caused by my tree. Otherwise, no deal. I'll discuss it with her." 2 days later, I received a revised settlement offer. Patricia would pay $5,000, provide a written apology, and the apology would include language acknowledging that her roof failure was due to installation defects, not tree damage. In exchange, I would sign a mutual release and agree to make no further complaints to the HOA about her conduct. I reviewed it with Robert Chen. "It's a reasonable offer," he said. "You're getting your costs covered and a clear admission that clears your name. The mutual release means you can't sue her for additional damages, but honestly, you'd probably only get nuisance damages beyond what she's already paying. It's up to you." I thought about it for a day. Part of me wanted to drag Patricia through a full lawsuit to make her face consequences for all the stress and harassment. But another part of me just wanted to move on with my life and enjoy my home without constant conflict. I signed the settlement agreement. The check arrived a week later, along with a typed letter from Patricia. It was stiff and formal, clearly written by her attorney, but it said what it needed to say. Her roof damage was caused by installation defects, not by my tree, and she apologized for the stress the dispute had caused. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A month passed peacefully. I used the settlement money to pay my legal bills and to hire Dr. Kim to complete the corrective pruning on my cottonwood. The tree was healing well, and she assured me it would fully recover within a year or two. Then, in early March, I received a notice that there would be a special meeting of the HOA board. The agenda included discussion of board member conduct and potential removal proceedings. I attended the meeting out of curiosity. The community room was packed. Apparently, I was not the only person Patricia had harassed over the years. Susan Klein, the secretary, called the meeting to order. Patricia was notably absent. "Thank you all for coming," Susan said. Over the past several weeks, the board has received numerous complaints about board president Patricia Pemberton's conduct, both in her role as president and as a private homeowner. These complaints include harassment of neighbors, abuse of her board position to pursue personal vendettas, and conduct unbecoming of a board officer. One by one, homeowners stood up and told their stories. A man named Carlos Rodriguez described how Patricia had threatened to fine him when his daughter's birthday party went past quiet hours by 15 minutes. A woman named Jennifer Lynn explained how Patricia had tried to force her to remove a garden sculpture because she personally found it ugly, even though it complied with all HOA guidelines. An elderly couple described how Patricia had reported them for a bylaw violation when their grass turned brown during a summer heat wave, despite the HOA's own water conservation guidelines encouraging reduced watering. The stories went on for an hour. By the end, a picture emerged of someone who had systematically abused her position as board president for years, using the HOA as her personal enforcement arm against anyone who annoyed her. Gerald Morrison, the treasurer, finally spoke up. "I've been on this board for 6 years, and I've watched Patricia become increasingly controlling and vindictive. The situation with Mr. Patterson was the final straw. She attempted to use HOA authority to pursue a personal dispute, and when that failed, she engaged in criminal conduct. I move that we remove Patricia Pemberton from her position as president and from the board entirely." Tom Wright seconded the motion. The vote was unanimous among the remaining board members. Susan explained that under the HOA bylaws, Patricia would be notified of the decision and would have an opportunity to appeal at the next general membership meeting. But unless she could convince a majority of homeowners to reinstate her, the removal was final. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me. "You did us all a favor," Carlos said. "None of us wanted to be the one to stand up to her, but you did it. Now maybe we can have a normal HOA that focuses on maintaining the community instead of being Patricia's personal kingdom." I drove home feeling vindicated but also a little sad. Patricia had clearly let whatever power came with being HOA president corrupt her completely. She had alienated her neighbors, cost herself a fortune in legal fees and settlements, and now had lost the position that seemed to define her identity. 2 weeks later, I was working in my yard when a moving truck pulled up to Patricia's house. I watched as movers loaded furniture and boxes into the truck. Patricia herself emerged wearing sunglasses and casual clothes, a far cry from her usual tennis whites and visor. She saw me watching and, to my surprise, walked over to the property wall. "I'm moving," she said simply. "I can see that." I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not the lawyer-written version. I was wrong about everything. The roof was my contractor's fault, not your tree, and I used my position on the board to bully you because I was angry and scared about the money. I did not know what to say. This was not the Patricia I had come to know over the past months. "I'm moving in with my daughter in Colorado," she continued. "Fresh start. I've been seeing a therapist, and she helped me understand that I'd been using the HOA as a way to feel in control after my husband died. He handled all the financial stuff, and when he passed 3 years ago, I felt lost. Being board president made me feel important again, but I took it way too far. I'm sorry about your husband," I said, and I meant it. "Thank you. I really am sorry for everything. Your tree is beautiful, and I hope it recovers." She walked back to her house, and I watched the movers continue their work. By evening, the house was empty and Patricia was gone. A month later, a young couple moved into Patricia's house. They introduced themselves as Nathan and Emily Harper, and they were friendly and normal. Emily loved gardening and asked if I'd mind if she planted some climbing jasmine on her side of the property wall. I told her that would be fine. The following week, the HOA held elections for a new board president. Susan Klein was elected, and her first act was to announce a comprehensive review of all HOA bylaws to remove any provisions that gave board members excessive authority over personal disputes. "We're here to maintain common areas and ensure property values," Susan announced at the meeting. "We're not here to police every aspect of our neighbors' lives. Let's get back to building a real community." The membership applauded. Life in Desert Springs Estates became peaceful after that. My cottonwood tree continued to heal, and Dr. Kim was right. Within 6 months, new growth had filled in the areas where the branches had been cut, and the tree looked almost as beautiful as it had when I bought the house. I ran into Frank Delgado one morning while checking my mail, and he told me he had heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia was doing better in Colorado. She had gotten involved with a gardening club and had made new friends. Her daughter had helped her get her finances in order, and she was apparently much happier. "It's a good ending," Frank said. "For everyone." He was right. What had started as a nightmare scenario with an HOA Karen demanding I fix her roof had transformed into something else entirely. Yes, it had cost me time, money, and stress. Yes, my beautiful tree had been damaged. But in the end, justice had prevailed. The structural engineer had confirmed what I suspected. Patricia's roof problems were her responsibility, not mine. The law had protected my property rights. And an entire community had been freed from a toxic leadership situation. I learned several valuable lessons from the experience. First, always know your legal rights when dealing with an HOA. They have power, but that power has limits, and homeowners can fight back when those limits are exceeded. Second, document everything. Every interaction, every photo, every expense. That documentation had been crucial in proving my case. Third, do not be afraid to hire professionals. The attorney and structural engineer had been expensive, but they had saved me from a much larger financial disaster. But the biggest lesson was about empathy. Patricia had been wrong in how she treated me and many other neighbors, but she had also been a widow struggling with loss and using control over the HOA as a coping mechanism. That did not excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand it. And understanding helped me let go of the anger I had been carrying. On a warm evening in late May, I was sitting on my back patio, enjoying the sunset over the mountains, when Nathan and Emily Harper invited me over for a barbecue. Their yard looked beautiful, with Emily's new jasmine plants already climbing the wall and perfuming the evening air. "We heard what happened with the previous owner," Nathan said as we ate burgers. "Must have been a nightmare." "It was challenging," I admitted, "but it worked out." "We're just glad to have normal neighbors now," Emily said. "No drama, just people living their lives." I raised my beer. "I'll drink to that." As the evening wore on and we talked about ordinary things like work and hobbies and the best restaurants in Scottsdale, I reflected on how much my life had changed in the past 6 months. I had bought my dream home expecting peace and quiet, and instead, I had gotten drawn into a legal battle that tested my patience and resolve. But I had stood my ground. I had not let an HOA bully intimidate me into accepting responsibility for something that was not my fault. I had used the legal system properly, hired experts, and proven my case. And in doing so, I had not only protected myself, but it helped an entire community escape from under the thumb of an abusive board president. The cottonwood tree stood tall in my yard, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. Some of those branches still extended over the property line into Nathan and Emily's yard, and neither of them had ever mentioned it, because that's what normal neighbors do. They understand that trees grow, leaves fall, and minor inconveniences are just part of living in a community. The whole experience had taught me that owning a home in an HOA community requires vigilance. You cannot assume that the board will always act in good faith or follow the law. You have to be prepared to stand up for yourself when they overreach. But you also have to pick your battles carefully and know when to seek professional help. I finished my beer and headed home as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. My house, my beautiful Spanish colonial with its terracotta tiles and mountain views, was truly mine now. No more threatening letters from the HOA. No more demands from Patricia. Just peaceful ownership of a property I loved in a neighborhood that had finally learned what community was supposed to mean. The story could have ended badly in so many ways. If I had not consulted an attorney, I might have been pressured into paying for Patricia's roof repairs or cutting down my tree. If I had not hired a structural engineer, I might not have been able to prove that the tree was not responsible for her roof failure. If the other board members had not finally stood up to Patricia, she might still be in power, making life miserable for everyone in the neighborhood. But none of those things happened. Instead, the system worked the way it was supposed to. Property laws protected my rights. The legal process provided a forum to resolve disputes. The HOA's own members exercised their authority to remove a bad actor. And in the end, everyone ended up in a better place than where they started. Even Patricia, despite losing her position and having to move, was apparently happier now. Sometimes losing everything is the catalyst people need to rebuild their lives in a healthier way. I hope that was true for her. As for me, I continued to live in my home, work on my architectural projects, and enjoy the Arizona sunshine. The cottonwood tree continued to grow and thrive, providing shade and beauty to my property. And Desert Springs Estates, under Susan's leadership, became the kind of community where people actually wanted to live, rather than a place ruled by fear and petty regulations. The whole ordeal had lasted about 4 months from start to finish, but it felt like much longer. The stress of being threatened with fines, dealing with lawyers, and watching someone vandalize my property had taken a toll. But I had survived it, and I had learned valuable lessons that would serve me well for the rest of my time as a homeowner. I also made some real friends in the neighborhood. Carlos Rodriguez and I started playing tennis on Saturday mornings. Jennifer Lynn's husband, David, turned out to be a fellow architecture enthusiast, and we would grab coffee and talk about building design. Frank Delgado became like a grandfather figure, always ready with advice or a story from his long life in Arizona. The neighborhood felt like a real community now, not just a collection of houses governed by an autocratic HOA board. People helped each other. We organized block parties and holiday events. We looked out for each other's properties when people traveled. It was everything a community should be. And none of it would have been possible if Patricia had remained in power. Her removal had been the catalyst for positive change throughout Desert Springs Estates. Other homeowners, emboldened by the successful challenge to her authority, started participating more actively in HOA meetings and decisions. The board became more transparent and responsive to member concerns. Susan implemented a new policy requiring all violation notices to be approved by at least 3 board members, preventing any single person from using violations as a weapon against personal enemies. She also established a grievance procedure for homeowners who felt they were being treated unfairly, giving everyone a voice in the process. These changes might seem minor, but they fundamentally altered the power dynamics in the community. No longer could one person dominate and intimidate. Decisions were made collectively, with input from the people affected by them. It was democracy on a small scale, and it worked beautifully. Looking back, I realized that standing up to Patricia had been one of the most important decisions I had made. It would have been easier to just trim the tree, to give in to her demands, to keep the peace at any cost. But doing so would have been wrong. It would have rewarded her bullying behavior and encouraged her to continue abusing her power. By fighting back, by insisting on my legal rights, by documenting everything and building a solid case, I had not only protected myself, but had helped create positive change for an entire community. That felt good. It felt like I had actually accomplished something meaningful beyond just winning a property dispute. My architectural work also benefited from the experience. I had always been interested in property law and zoning regulations as they related to building design. But now, I had practical, real-world experience with how those laws actually worked in practice. I found myself better able to advise my clients on HOA issues and property line disputes because I had lived through one myself. The $5,000 settlement from Patricia had covered my direct costs, but I had still lost time and experienced significant stress. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Some battles are worth fighting not because of what you gain, but because of what you prevent. I prevented Patricia from continuing her reign of terror over the neighborhood. I prevented future homeowners from being subjected to the same treatment I had received. And I proved that HOAs, despite their power, are not above the law. As summer arrived in Scottsdale and temperatures soared into triple digits, I found myself spending more time in my backyard under the shade of my cottonwood tree. The tree that had started this whole mess now provided me with cool comfort during the hottest parts of the day. Its leaves rustled in the breeze, and occasionally some would drift over the property wall into Nathan and Emily's yard. Neither of them ever complained. One afternoon, while I was working on my laptop under the tree, Emily called over the wall. "Marcus, we're having a few people over tonight for dinner. Would you like to join us?" "I'd love to," I replied. That evening, sitting in their backyard with several other neighbors, eating good food and enjoying good conversation, I felt truly at home for the first time since moving to Desert Springs Estates. This was what community was supposed to be, not violation notices and fines and threats. Not power trips by petty tyrants. Just neighbors being neighborly, supporting each other, and making life a little bit better for everyone. Someone asked me to tell the story of what had happened with Patricia and the tree. I gave them the short version, hitting the highlights without dwelling too much on the stress and conflict. "You really stood up to her," Carlos said. "That took courage." "It took documentation and a good attorney," I replied, deflecting the compliment. But yeah, I was not going to let her blame me for her roof problems when I did not do anything wrong. "The tree looks great, by the way," Nathan added. "That arborist did a fantastic job with the corrective pruning." "Thanks. It's almost back to how it looked when I bought the place." The conversation moved on to other topics, and I sat back and listened, feeling content. Life was good. My home was secure. My neighborhood was healthy and functional. And my cottonwood tree, the innocent victim of Patricia's misplaced anger, stood tall and strong, providing beauty and shade for years to come. That tree had become a symbol for me. It had weathered a storm, both literally and figuratively. It had been wounded but had survived and was now healing. Just like me. Just like the community. We had all been damaged by Patricia's behavior, but we had survived and grown stronger. As darkness fell and the dinner party wound down, I walked back to my house, pausing to look up at my tree silhouetted against the star-filled Arizona sky. Its branches reached toward the heavens, some extending over property lines, some staying strictly within my boundaries, all of them part of a single living organism that cared nothing for human disputes about whose responsibility it was to clean up fallen leaves. The tree just grew. It did what trees do, and in doing so, it had inadvertently taught me an important lesson about life. Sometimes the best response to conflict is simply to keep growing, keep reaching for the sky, and trust that your roots are strong enough to weather any storm. My roots in Desert Springs Estates were now strong. I had fought for my place here and won. I had made friends and built relationships. This was no longer just a house I owned. It was truly my home in every sense of the word, and that made everything I had gone through worthwhile.